So this morning's spiritual reading is from this little book called Tell Me Another Story, which I've used for the spiritual reading before. And the story that inspired me is a little story called In Memory of the Elephant. And it spoke to me as like a parable of what our political leaders are all about, and left me with hope of what could happen. So, In Memory of the Elephant. The jungle was a busy place filled with creatures on the hunt. Some hunted for food, others for shelter. All looked for answers to the questions of life. Big Ash, the elephant, was no different from the others. He ate and slept and dreamed and hoped just as they did. The only difference was that Big Ash had a wonderful memory for the details of life. And being able to call to mind so many different things, he was thought to be very wise indeed. Big Ash could remember the cycles of the moon, and so could tell when the rainy season would come. Being the only elephant in his part of the jungle, the other creatures had no way of knowing that his talent, while impressive, was in no way miraculous. When he was young, Big Ash tried to tell those around him that anyone could do as he did, but after a while he began to enjoy the attention and benefits he received. It was not long before the elephant began to believe what people said of him, that he was better than any other animal alive. His manner changed. He was no longer a humble creature willing to use his knowledge to help others learn. Instead of sharing, he became greedy for the riches he could gain with his knowledge. When two apes came to him and asked, "Oh, wise one, what shall we eat for breakfast today?" Big Ash found that he was disgusted by their worship of him. He thought, "If they are foolish enough to follow me, then I will feel no sorrow over gaining from their folly." "Show me what you have," Big Ash said grandly. The monkeys placed 3 bananas and 2 canes of sugar at his massive gray feet. Big Ash took on a mischievous look. His large gray eyes gleamed. "For the price of 1 banana and 2 sugar canes, I will tell you," he said. The apes paid his price. "You should eat 1 banana for breakfast," Big Ash has spoken, and he scooped up his new riches in his trunk. Instead of feeling cheated, the 2 monkeys chattered excitedly for all to hear. "See how wise is the great Big Ash. 1 banana is exactly what we have now. The solution was so simple we should have thought of it ourselves." Big Ash was very glad that they had not thought for themselves, as their relying upon him was making him a very happy elephant indeed. He had all the food he could ever need, and his followers built a great palace high on a rise above the jungle. One sunny day, Big Ash met a bird that had just flown in from a far mountain and learned from him that a terrible storm was coming. He did not rush to warn the others for the sake of kindness. Instead, he trumpeted the gathering signal on his great trunk, and his followers swarmed around him. "I have had a vision," he announced. "What is this new knowledge worth to you, my faithful?" The others began murmuring and wondering what the Great One had seen in his enormous mind. "For the price of 2 bananas and 3 canes of sugar, I shall share my vision," he said. While some poor animals could not raise the goods for the fee, others scurried to and fro gathering their offerings, and then were told of the coming storm. The animals that did not know of the storm were caught in its fury and died. For a moment, Big Ash looked upon the destruction and felt sadness for those who had perished. Too soon, however, he was beset by followers thanking him and praising him. He turned away from the ones he had left out in the storm. Time passed, and Big Ash became the ruler of all he surveyed. He had so many followers and assistants that he barely ever left his great palace. He would merely speak his latest insights to his helpers, and they would go out to the faithful and collect the tribute. One day, Bagash was walking in his gardens when he heard a great commotion on the other side of the garden wall. "Save us! Help us, O Great One!" the voices cried. Bagash stood on his hind legs and peered over the great wall and saw hundreds of animals gathered. "The hunters' guns have been heard in the distance," cried one of the faithful. "Give us shelter in your great palace." Bagash was about to do as he was asked when his assistants, a pack of howler monkeys and hyenas, rushed in upon him and insisted he keep the gates barred. "Really, Bagash," said Maul the monkey, "it will be too crowded in here with all those beasts. The hunters will pass. Besides, once you let them in, they will see that you live as an elephant and not as a great god, and all will be lost to you. You will be just an elephant once more." Bagash had grown so accustomed to listening to his helpers and believing himself to be all-knowing that he had forgotten how to think for himself. He had become like so many of his followers. He was desperate for advice, and so he did as he was advised. Returning to the wall, he looked over and made his announcement. "Because you have been so faithful, I will not charge you for this advice. Fear not the hunter will pass. Go home. Bagash has spoken." And so it was that the animals went back down the hill and into the jungle. Bagash went back to his garden and his thoughts and plans. All was quiet until late that night when a hunter's moon rose high in the sky, and the shrieks and wails of the animals could be heard with the echoes of the great guns of the huntsmen. Bagash hid in his palace until the sunrise, and then mustered his very small amount of courage to go down into the jungle below. All was silent, as a thin gray mist clung around his ankles and seeped into the low ferns. As he walked, the mist cleared, and beneath it he saw the remains of the animals that had once stood before him to ask his wise advice. Seeing them, he became sick and frightened. He turned and began to charge blindly through the jungle. He wanted to run away from what he had done. No matter how far or hard he charged, he still saw their faces and heard their cries. Finally, Bagash found himself at the great waterfall that spilled down from the towering cliffs above. In exhaustion and misery, he decided to lose himself beneath the pounding water. He knew that the thundering of the falls would drown out the voices in his head. He would close his eyes tight, and he would not see the faces of the animals. The water beat down on him and pushed his great gray form to the bottom of the river, pinning him there. Then all was quiet. Bagash opened his eyes and looked up at the surface of the water. To his great surprise, he did not see churning waters and chaos, but a glassy mirror of calm hanging above him. In it he saw reflected his entire life. He saw his gifts and how he had misused them. He saw each time he had taken advantage of another creature when he could have used his knowledge to give aid and comfort, not for a price, but for the joy of good grace. Try as he might, he could not drown his sorrows. His huge lungs held the air, as did his trunk, but he could not manage to let go of the last breath. Bagash sank a little lower into the mud at the bottom of the river and wished with all his heart that he could forget his failings. "I am sorry, my friend, but I do not take back gifts once given," said a voice in his large ears. Bagash blinked and thrashed in terror, but could not see the source of the voice. The crushing waters kept him pinned to the bottom, and he could not struggle free. The voice spoke again. "Your gift is your memory, and it is long. It remembers joy and pain alike." Again, Bagash called to mind his failings. Yes, you have failed yourself and others, said the voice. Now remember this. I am with you always. I am with those you fail. I am the water of life that you drink, that washes you clean and makes the jungle thrive. Hearing these words, Bagash felt weak and humble. He stopped struggling and felt himself being pulled along the bottom of the river until he was free of the pressure of the falls. Then he rose gently to the surface and took his first breath. He stood up and found that he felt lighter and smaller. When he looked down at the still water, he did not see an old tired elephant, but a young calf. What has happened to me, he said, what happened to me, he asked the shifting wet mirror. The water rippled around his ankles. No, you are not physically young again, the voice said. When you return, others will still see you as the same old Bagash, but you will forever look into water and see your true self, a child of the waters of life. It is a new gift. But I don't deserve a new gift, Bagash protested. Ah, my dear one, said the waters. Sometimes the most precious gift is not the one we deserve, but the one we need. One who gives from the heart will never forget that this is so. Bagash would remember. So I hope we have the same miracle in our political system.